All right, today we are diving deep into a huge Supreme Court case that basically drew the first real map for our digital rights here in the Philippines. And look, this isn't just some dusty legal case. It's about what you and I can actually do and not do online. So let's get right into it.
So let's start with a crazy question. Could a simple Facebook like, something you probably do dozens of times a day without even thinking, actually get you thrown in jail? I mean, it sounds totally absurd, right?
Well, believe it or not, this wasn't some hypothetical scenario. In 2014, this was a very real legal question that made its way all the way to the Supreme Court. And their answer was going to change the internet for millions of Filipinos.
Okay, so to really get what this whole fight was about, we first have to understand the law itself. The internet, cyberspace, it's obviously amazing for communication, for business, for everything. But the government argued that this new frontier also opened up a whole new playground for, as the court put it, persons of ill will to cause all sorts of trouble. So, the Cybercrime Prevention Act was created to go after some very real and very nasty online threats. We're talking about things like hacking, identity theft, child pornography, and even cyber squatting. When someone maliciously grabs a domain name. These were the things the law was supposedly designed to stop.
But here's where it got messy. A whole bunch of people, citizens, digital rights groups, started raising the alarm. Petitions started flooding the Supreme Court, all saying the same thing, that some parts of this law were way too broad, so vague that they were stepping on the fundamental rights of regular people, especially our right to free speech.
And that brings us to the first major battleground of this case. Freedom of speech. The argument was pretty simple. This new law was putting our everyday online conversations, our posts, even our simple little likes and shares on trial.
At the very heart of this debate was the old-school crime of libel. Now, for ages, the law has punished people for writing defamatory things in newspapers or books. This new law basically just copy-pasted that crime onto the internet, creating what we now call cyber libel.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Under traditional libel law, there's something called presumed malice. Basically, if you say something that damages someone's reputation, the law just assumes you meant to be malicious. But when it comes to talking about public figures, there's a much higher bar called actual malice. You have to prove the person knew what they were saying was false. The new Cybercrime Act, it didn't really bother to make that distinction clear.
And this quote just nails the problem perfectly. The Supreme Court itself acknowledged that the internet is a different beast. It's freewheeling, it's fast, it's informal, so trying to apply a 100-year-old law to this brand new world was, well, it was always going to be a problem.
So, after all that, what did the court decide? Well, for the person who actually writes and posts something defamatory online, the original author, the court said, yep, the law is valid, you can be held criminally responsible for cyber libel.
Okay, so the author is on the hook. But this is where it gets really complicated. The law also had a provision against aiding or abetting a crime. So what about the millions of us who interact with that post? Are we suddenly criminals too?
I mean, just think about how you use social media every day. You see a post, you might like it, you might drop a comment, or you might share it with all of your friends. Every single one of those actions pushes that original message out to more people.
And this brings up a really important legal idea called the chilling effect. The argument was, if just liking or sharing something could get you arrested, people would get scared. They'd just stop talking about anything important or controversial online. And that fear, that self-censorship, is a serious threat to public discussion.
And on this point, the Supreme Court completely agreed. It struck down that part of the law. The court said you can't punish people for aiding libel just by liking, commenting, or sharing. So, to answer our first big question, no, you cannot be sent to jail for clicking like. That is protected speech.
But this whole legal war wasn't just about free speech. It also dug into another huge right we all have, the right to privacy. The petitioners argued the law gave the government scary new powers to watch everything we do online.
The key term to understand here is traffic data. Now, this isn't the content of your email or your chat message. It's the data about the message. Think of it like this: who sent it, who it's going to, when it was sent, and how big it is.
The court used a fantastic analogy to explain this. Think of a sealed envelope. The private letter inside is your content. It's heavily protected. But the traffic data is like the address and the stamp written on the outside of the envelope. Anyone who handles the mail can see that information.
And here was the huge problem. Section 12 of this new law let police collect that outside-of-the-envelope data in real time, as it was happening. And they could do it without a warrant from a judge, based on this super vague standard called due cause.
Now get this. This was a wild moment in court. The government's own top lawyer, the Solicitor General, actually admitted that this part of the law offered, and I'm quoting here, minimal protection to internet users. I mean, wow. That admission showed how weak the privacy protections really were.
So yeah, no surprise here. The court struck this down. It ruled that letting the government collect our data in real time without a warrant, based on a fuzzy term like due cause, was a clear violation of our constitutional right to privacy. The court said it was basically like giving the police a blank check to search anyone, anytime, which the Constitution absolutely forbids.
So after this massive legal showdown, where did the Supreme Court finally draw the line? What are our rights in this digital world? Let's take a look at the final results.
Okay, here's the final scorecard. You can see a really clear pattern here, right? The court said, yes, online libel for the person who wrote it is a crime, but it struck down everything else that was too broad or didn't have proper safeguards. That included punishing likes and shares, collecting data without a warrant, and even a weird section on spam that the court said went too far.
When you really boil it all down, this whole case was about one thing: balance. On one hand, the government has a job to do in stopping actual online crime. But on the other hand, our fundamental rights, our freedom of speech, our right to privacy, they don't just vanish the second we go online. The court had to find that incredibly delicate line between the two.
You know, this case settled some huge questions for its time, but it also leaves us with an even bigger one. Technology is moving so much faster than our laws can keep up. This decision was a snapshot, a moment in time, but the fight to define our rights in the digital world, that is far from over.